Hello, I will be analyzing gender and sexuality in Shakespeare, particularly in three of his works, King Lear, As You Like It, and The Twelfth Night, beginning with King Lear. The play begins with the resignation of Lear, the King of Britain. He decides to divide his kingdom between his three daughters, Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. The division of the kingdom will depend solely on the quality of each princess's declarations of love for her father. With flowery professions of affection, Goneril, the Duchess of Albany, and Regan, the Duchess of Cornwall, win their father's praise and kingdom. The mood is bright, and Lear urges his youngest, Cordelia, to outdo her sister's words. With this challenge set, Cordelia solemnly states, "Nothing, my lord." Once the shock of these words dissipates, it is revealed that Cordelia said nothing, for the simple reason that she cannot voice her deep love for Lear. Lear, unable to see this, wrongfully disowns and banishes her from the kingdom. What a heartwarming tale. Not? In reality, the way Lear decides on how to divide his kingdom is entirely misogynistic in nature. The basis of these divisions is purely based on the daughters' devotion to their father. There is no mention of ability or political prowess. Lear even decides to live with his daughters, almost as if to still hold power in his kingdom, even though retired. There is a blatantly sexist understanding of women in power, where their abilities are directly correlated to how much devotion they have to men. And this idea of devotion and loyalty are themes that are frequently explored in this play. For example, there persists a sentiment that women cannot hold power because they are disloyal. In being disloyal for not being able to express her feelings of love for her father, Cordelia is banished from her home and seen as an unfit queen. This betrayal of trust is later viewed in Goneril and Regan, which we'll get to next. In order to properly explain the theme of gender and sexuality in this play, here's another noteworthy aspect. Goneril had become increasingly exasperated by Lear's 100 companions who disturb her life at Albany's palace. Goneril is upset that Lear is intruding on her life as a ruler, even after he had said he was giving up his position of power, which, in all honesty, is a truly justifiable feeling. However, Lear sees this as disloyalty. When Goneril attempts to limit Lear's companions, Lear accuses her of stripping away his manhood. Instead of considering his daughter's perspective, Lear feels emasculated and for the first time, fearful that his daughters have the power to take away his dominance over their lives. Lear leaves to Regan's kingdom after cursing Goneril for her criticisms. Here is a clip of said curses.
Hear nature, hear. Dear goddess, hear. Suspend thy purpose, if thou didst intend to make this creature fruitful. Into her womb convey sterility. Dry up in her the organs of increase. From her derogate body never spring a babe to honor her. If she must teem, create her child of spleen, that it may live and be a thwart disnatured torment to her. Let it stamp wrinkles in her brow of youth, with catered tears fret channels in her cheeks, turn all her mother's pains and benefits to laughter and contempt, that she may feel how sharper than a serpent's tooth it is to have a thankless child.
Even his curses relate to female sexuality. He curses Goneril with sterility, and wishes that if she isn't sterile, her births are painful. Now, there are many things Lear could have cursed her with. He could have wished for her kingdom to fall, or for her ability to rule to vanish. But in his eyes, a woman's worth is directly related with her ability to give birth, as bearing children is the highest honor a woman can have. His curses all surround her body, expressing the idea that a woman's value is only so much as her body is worth. Now back to Regan and Lear. Instead of accepting her father with open arms, Regan spurns him and his followers for showing up unannounced. Shocked by his daughter's actions and regretting rejecting Cordelia, Lear goes mad. And now to expand on the idea of disloyalty and sexuality. The fool, Lear's loyal companion, implies that Lear has horns after Lear explains his daughter's betrayal. Horns is a symbol relating to sexual infidelity that Shakespeare often utilizes. In this context, the fool equates Lear's daughters to a cheating wife. The daughter's anger that their father is imposing on their power is once again related to the idea that women who don't conform to patriarchal standards are disloyal and therefore untrustworthy figures of power. The constant equation of a woman's power to sexual promiscuity perpetuates blatantly misogynistic ideas. And lastly, Goneril and Regan have a bitter and jealous rivalry over Edmund, an illegitimate son of the Earl of Gloucester. Goneril poisons Regan. Edgar, a legitimate son of Gloucester, kills Edmund, and seeing no other way out, Goneril kills herself. Cordelia, who had been captured by Albany's army, is not rescued in time and is hanged. The story ends as Lear dies over the deep heartbreak he feels after losing his youngest daughter. There's no doubt that King Lear is a tragic tale. Many of the characters perish in horrendous ways. But let's go over how the women perish. Goneril and Regan, both women in power, die due to bitter jealousy over a man. This fight is horrendously sexist and, in a way, to kill off characters who formerly held a great deal of influence. It gives power back to the men as they are seen as more valuable than a familial sisterly bond. It plays into sexuality and how women will betray and kill to get the sexual object of their desires. Even Cordelia's death is determined by a man. Edmund's confession was the only thing able to save Cordelia, playing into a damsel in distress scenario and how valuable a man's words are. And unfortunately, in this case, Cordelia's knight in shining armor came far too late. Something additional to note is that many times is a male anguish equated to women. Lear's madness and other men's abilities to emote are seen as feminine or caused by women. Cornwall, who is the suitor of Regan, is seen as womanly, and poor Tom's suffering is blamed on his daughters that, spoiler alert, don't even exist. Anytime a man acts untypical of a masculine, unfeeling stone, they are immediately compared to women in an incredibly derogatory way. Lear is a tough pill to swallow and is definitely not used as a work of woman empowerment. An underlying message of men's superiority permeates through the majority of Shakespeare's works. In the next segment, we'll be discussing As You Like It. While containing more sexually ambiguous characters, we'll explore how society's influence of male power persists. As You Like It is a play dedicated to toying with the idea of fluid gender expression and offering the power that comes with it. The majority of the action occurs in the woods, a place notorious for its sexual connotations. Shakespeare often uses the woods as an escape from the rigid societal conventions. In a play that has one of the main characters, Rosalind, transform into a man, an act that already goes against societal norms, having the woods is almost a confirmation of atypicality. However, just as many of his plays end with exiting the woods, a woodland setting exists only to be a temporary release from normality and one that everyone must eventually return from. This is further proven when Rosalind reveals that she is a woman and everyone returns back to society, living as socially acceptable pairs. As You Like It begs the question, how truly different are men and women? Phoebe, who sends a harshly worded letter to Rosalind, disguised as Ganymede, is seen as manly for her blunt words. Ganymede is described as a beautiful young man creating femininity in men. It creates four interesting dynamics that often go against Elizabethan gender conventions. Rosalind is the clearest example of fluidity between the binaries that Shakespeare uses. Her femininity is expressed in her passionate feelings of love, but her ability to express her erotic desire is granted to her only while dressed as a man. The temporary feelings of power she holds is granted when she is a man as well. Ganymede protects from rapists and thieves. Ganymede is able to discard passivity when confronted with someone he loves, and Ganymede is able to solve the conflict of the play. Ganymede can exist and exist successfully temporarily, for his existence can only be as brief as visit into the ambiguous woods, as we described before. Otherwise, Rosalind, would be too stuck in her persona of a man, Ganymede, and would be unable to transform back into being a full-fledged woman. The play predominantly focuses on male sexuality and how the dynamics between men expressing emotion to each other are different than men expressing emotion to women. Orlando can freely discuss his feelings to Ganymede about Rosaline because there is a feeling of instant connection. Men have been socially conditioned to behave in a very macho manner in front of women so as to not seem weak. But because Ganymede is in fact a man, there was trust built from the very beginning and an assumption of understanding. Ganymede was able to see how earnestly Orlando loved Rosaline and could see how truthful he was about his love. In contrast, Celia, who was dressed in plain clothing but still presented as a woman, could not see the honest depth of her love's feelings because that instant understanding was not present. In this small way, Shakespeare is able to communicate that even in a gender-ambiguous play, distinctions between gender exist. Likewise, there is a symbol of female sexuality. Hymen comes down from the heavens to transform Rosaline back into a woman. Biologically, the hymen is a tissue found in female genitalia that plays a vital role in menstruation. In modern times, the hymen isn't necessarily an indication that someone is a female. But in the Shakespearean era, it was a great symbol of femininity and was the transformation point for Rosaline. Hymen's presence forced Rosaline to embrace her female side. A further look into sexuality reveals something more than a typical woman-man love. Homoeroticism is everywhere in the story. Shakespeare himself was rumored as gay, and some of his works are seen to be about young men. In this play in particular, homoeroticism is seen in Ganymede. The name itself has homosexual connotations, for Ganymede was the lover of Juno, the king of gods. Rosaline and Orlando's relationship is sexually ambiguous because Orlando feels comfortable using Ganymede as practice for confessions. He freely discusses his desires for Rosaline to Ganymede, making Ganymede the object of affection for flowery and romantic words. While Rosaline and Orlando met while Rosaline was presenting as female, their relationship truly developed in the woods, where Rosaline became Ganymede. This homoeroticism is only made possible by the ambiguity of sexuality and Shakespeare's unspoken assertions that gender is a socially constructed idea. Androgyny is further established when considering the historical context. While this photo isn't necessarily from the play As You Like It, and during Shakespearean times, women were not permitted to act in theater, so male actors had to play the part of a woman disguised as a man. The actors had to learn how to carry feminine characteristics while also selling the idea that Rosaline is transformed. This manipulation of femininity is only successful due to Shakespeare's ability to assert gender as a malleable social definition. Actors often slipped in and out of expressing their actual genders, using she pronouns when acting as Rosaline and stating if I were a woman when acting as Ganymede. Actors' abilities to settle for and show an ever-changing identity implies that a socially crafted identity is a myth. Shakespeare still prescribes by power and gender, where men hold more strength and ultimately are seen as dominating figures. However, he shows that women too can successfully embrace these ideas of dominance and masculinity, even if only for a little while. Taking it in an entirely uplifting way, through giving women the ability to perform tasks as a man, Shakespeare goes to show that women are just as capable as men are in solving tough tasks and becoming leads in stories. There are many other aspects of the play that go against patriarchal ideas. Rosaline is even included in the epilogue, and honor usually left to male narrators. Celia, Rosaline's cousin, is not afraid of breaking free from the stereotypical devoted daughter and often criticizes her father's actions. Phoebe holds the power in her relationship with Sylvius, and while Sylvius regains his dominance after marriage, their relationship was ultimately crafted in an atypical way, where a woman was dominant. Because dominance in gender was such an important idea during Shakespearean times, seeing it bestowed upon two different genders was a wholly feministic notion that hadn't previously existed in Elizabethan art. Now finally for the Twelfth Night. The Twelfth Night is another example of gender fluidity and the expression of homoerotic love disguised in a heterosexual manner. Disguise is once again utilized in a similar manner to that of As You Like It. Viola, wanting to mourn her brother's death properly, dresses as Cesario, a man. Instead of being employed at Lady Olivia's home, she works for Duke Orsino, who Viola, dressed as Cesario, falls in love with. A terrible love triangle ensues as Lady Olivia falls for Cesario, Cesario falls for Orsino, and Orsino remains desperately in love with Olivia. Sexual fluidity persists because these characters are unaware of each other's true gender due to that tricky element of disguise. Ambiguity allows same-sex love to be accepted by audience during the Shakespearean era. Viola fully commits to being a man, going by Cesario, who I will from this point forward refer to using he, acts in a masculine manner, and shapes his identity around the typical man. This is further corroborated by Orsino continuing to refer to Viola as Cesario even after his original identity is revealed. Shakespeare found pleasure in experimenting with sexuality and how it breaks the bounds of gender. Orsenio's attraction to Cesario reveals the intrinsic desire individuals have for others. While it ends in a straight manner, where Viola assumes the role of Viola and marries Orsenio, Orsenio is almost reluctant to throw away the distinctive quality of he in his love, as if that's an integral part of their relationship, almost as much as the feminine qualities of Cesario make up the basis of their relationship. Their romance cannot be described in any heterosexual fashion, for Shakespeare abandoned those labels in this play. An interesting point to consider is that Olivia and Antonio could not differentiate Sebastian from Cesario. In my modern perspective, I found it difficult to understand how they couldn't see any difference between the two, as biological differences exist between sexes, i.e., breasts and height. What I failed to realize is that I was perpetuating a very black and white view on gender. Taking into account historical circumstances, Shakespeare had a different perspective on womanhood. All his actors were male, therefore the absence of a quote-unquote womanly body figure was absent from his work. I would go so far as to assume that he created his characters with the image that a male actor was going to be portraying them on stage rather than a female actor. And this does in fact make his plays a whole lot more ambiguous in sexuality and gender. It goes to deconstruct the entire system that has upheld gender binaries. This play is a true mockery of social norms. Olivia is a figure who is carefully crafted in order to represent how vague gender lines can be. As mentioned before, her inability to distinguish between a woman dressed as a man and a man is Shakespeare's way of describing how malleable and often ambiguous gender can/should be. His inclusion of Sebastian is just a tool to make the play more easily accepted. If the Twelfth Night were to just describe the attraction of Olivia to a transformed man and the attraction of Orsenio to a young, beautiful man, the homoeroticism would be too clear to be allowed in theater. Therefore, Shakespeare utilizes Sebastian in the most chaotic way in order to fully communicate how androgynous love between all genders is. Sebastian can be also interpreted as a pretty complex character that reveals how attraction to a person's outward appearance can be more enticing than a strong bond. Antonio and Sebastian had a very homoerotic connection, going so far as even sharing a kiss in modern plays.
Farewell. The gentleness of all the gods go with thee.
They've journeyed together both in the sexual and literal sense. However, Sebastian very quickly accepts Olivia's proposal due to her beauty and wealth without so much as a second thought to Antonio. He poses the question of how simplicity and attraction can spur more dramatic action, in this case Sebastian marrying Olivia, than a deep connection, what he established with Antonio, can. It reveals another form of sexuality that Shakespeare sought to establish. Now back to that delicious historical context. Since a male actor once again had to dress as a woman in this play, Shakespeare also sought to communicate that masculinity is just a matter of appearances that one, no matter what gender, can wear. The ability for Viola to fully embrace and successfully convince all the characters in the play that she is, in fact, Cesario, a man, communicates how easily gender can be thrown into the realms of androgyny. Its transformative nature is a progressive idea that society is only just beginning to accept. While this play may not communicate power struggles between gender and sexuality as clearly as You Like It did, it arguably shows the clearest display of sexuality and gender in any of Shakespeare's works. The end. Thank you.